BBC News at midday, this is Justine Green. One of Britain's biggest tour operators, Jet2, has announced it's suspending all package holidays until late June, blaming a lack of clarity from the government on its plans for restarting foreign travel from England. Ministers say it's too soon to decide which countries will be ranked as low, medium and high risk under the new traffic light system. Foreign holidays are currently banned until at least the 17th of May. The Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says he wants to drive down the cost of PCR coronavirus tests required for foreign travel. Annarella Prime, an NHS key worker and mother of 4, says the cost of the tests will have an impact on families.
It would be certainly a consideration, absolutely. But I suppose if it saves quarantining with, a family of 6, that would be an advantage. But obviously, the PCR tests are in conjunction with quarantining, I believe, for the red zone. So it's definitely doing the PCR tests and having to pay for that would be quite an additional fee to a family holiday.
Analysis by Public Health England suggests that the COVID vaccination programme has prevented the deaths of more than 10,000 people over the age of 60. More than 15 million jabs had been given to adults in that age group by the end of March. 19 police officers were injured in last night's violence in Belfast, with crowds throwing petrol bombs and fireworks. Our island correspondent Chris Page says there's anxiety the situation will get worse before it gets better.
Most of the rioting that's happened in Northern Ireland over the last week or so has occurred in loyalist areas. Now, the police have spoken over the last number of months really about unease in those communities, about the Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland. People see the new trading arrangements under which goods coming here from the rest of the UK need to be inspected as creating a new economic border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK and diminishing the sense of Britishness that is very, very important to loyalists.
MPs are calling on the government to scrap the use of the body mass index, or BMI, to determine if someone is a healthy weight. The cross-party Women and Equalities Committee is concerned that it exacerbates eating disorders. Its chair, Caroline Noakes, wants a more tailored approach to measuring individuals' health.
BMI, we know, it has been used for years, but was actually established as a measurement across populations, so to give you an average, and based on a European man's body physique. So it gives a really bad indicator of good health in women and particularly in black communities. And what we've seen is huge numbers of black children labelled as obese or overweight because BMI simply doesn't work for their body type.
The Halifax says UK house prices reached a record high last month. The value of the average property climbed to just under £255,000, the first increase since November, and a rise of 6.5% compared with March last year. And that's the BBC News at 3 minutes past 12.
Listen live on the BBC Sounds app. Hello, this is Vanessa Felt sitting in for Jeremy Vine on the programme this lunchtime. Travel companies say expensive mandatory COVID tests could make foreign holidays this summer the preserve of the wealthy. But is that tough luck? Is it fair to say if you want to go abroad, you need to pay the price? A group of MPs say that body mass index as a measure of obesity should be scrapped because it inspires weight stigma. Did you feel shamed by your BMI? How difficult is it when you disagree with your partner over how to parent your child? For example, they're very strict and you are not. And do the flowers that you leave at a cemetery graveside keep getting eaten by rabbits? Please email your comment to vine@bbc.co.uk and include your name and phone number, or text your point to 88291.
BBC Radio 2.
Pat Benatar, love is a battlefield. This morning, the government said foreign summer holidays are back on the cards. Just like last year, there'll be an official traffic light system. Low-risk countries will be green, those on the watch list amber, and places with high rates of coronavirus will be red. Ministers are expected to allow quarantine-free travel from the 17th of May to a small number of green-listed countries, most likely Israel, Gibraltar, Greece and Malta. However, while would-be holidaymakers are celebrating, one element of the plan causing controversy is the cost of the testing system. All passengers will have to take COVID tests before leaving and on returning, even from green countries. Only the more accurate PCR tests will be accepted on return, and at over £120 each, they're not cheap. As an example, a return trip to Greece currently requires 5 tests overall. That's £370 per person, nearly £1,500 for a family of 4. The travel industry says this will mean only wealthy people will be able to afford to fly. It'll certainly make things even more difficult for those wanting to reunite with family abroad, for example. Earlier, the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, said he wants to cut the cost of COVID tests.
We want to see these tests be as cheap and convenient as possible. And I'm going to work with the travel industry and the private testing providers to drive down that cost. I won't spare those companies that seem to be profiteering, including potentially removing them from the recommended list.
However, critics ask why the government is considering subsidising foreign holidays during a global pandemic. They argue that if you can afford flights, accommodation and a beer on the beach, you need to suck it up and pay for a test to keep everyone back home as safe as possible. So give us your view on this. You can email Vine at bbc.co.uk with your phone number or text us on 88299.
This is BBC News. We're interrupting our schedules for the following announcement. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. A statement from Buckingham Palace said, "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen has announced the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle." Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. A statement from Buckingham Palace said, "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen has announced the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle."
Tom Sanders, it's 12 minutes past 12. This is Evan Davis. You're listening to BBC News, broadcasting a special programme across all BBC radio networks following the announcement of the death of His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh. I am joined by BBC Royal correspondent Johnny Diamond. Johnny, this is news of enormous significance for Britain and the royal family.
It is enormously significant, as you say, for the country and for the family. But of course, it is of most significance to the Queen. And the statement from Buckingham Palace made that very clear. The reference to Prince Philip as the Queen's beloved husband and of the Queen's deep sorrow. She is a woman who does not go out of her way to speak in great emotion, but she made very clear 20 or so years ago on her golden wedding, how much she had lent upon Prince Philip in the many, many decades of her service and his service, saying that he was her strength and stay. And so many people's thoughts will be with the Queen now, and of course with the children and the grandchildren who will now presumably be making their way towards London as soon as they will be able to, and to Windsor. But also a time for reflection on long, long decades of service that Prince Philip gave the country, from the marriage to the Queen in 1947, her accession, of course, to the throne, and then the long times and the long periods he spent at her side and also away from her, carrying out duties on behalf of the Crown. So a sad day, obviously, for his family, but also for the nation that he served for so long.
Obviously, Johnny had been in hospital for quite an extended period, perhaps determined to get home from hospital.
Certainly. He went into hospital in mid-February, and I think there was surprise as that period went on at how long he spent there. And it was clear that his health was not as it had once been. He spent a life of incredible vigour, incredible dynamism, marked only really, I suppose, in the last 10 or so years with visits to hospital. He had a heart condition, which we understand was dealt with in hospital this time around. There were problems also with a bladder condition that he had for some years. But most of his life was marked, as I say, with an energy which surprised onlookers, an energy which, even in his 70s, was remarked upon by one biographer as if he was having a second youth. But in the end, as it does with all of us, time did weary him. He retired from public life a few years ago. We barely saw him apart from those excursions to hospital. And then there was one last public appearance last year as he handed over his final honorary command, a brief public appearance at Windsor Castle. And then really the last we saw of him was as he was driven from hospital around mid-March this year. The hopes of many would have been, of course, that he would live for some time after that. But it seems that the illness did finally take him, and that aged 99, he has left us.
Age 99. To think the first member of the royal family to travel in a helicopter, so much has happened over his long life. You're listening to BBC News. We are interrupting BBC schedules for the announcement of the death of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. I will just repeat the statement from the palace. It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. Further announcements will be made in due course. The royal family join with people around the world in mourning his loss. Well, he was the consort for 73 years. He married Princess Elizabeth in 1947, the 20th of November, the first male partner for a British head of state since Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. Obviously had a unique role in British life and will be remembered for that commitment to charities, the Duke of Edinburgh scheme, the award scheme, his advocacy for conservation and the environment. Perhaps surprisingly, given he once claimed that in a constitutional sense he simply didn't exist, he did play an important role in modernising the royal family and making them accessible to the public while helping to steer the monarchy through a period of enormous change. And he will, of course, also be remembered for that direct way of speaking and the occasional gaffe. When he himself was asked about his contribution to public life, he answered in a typically forthright style.
I've just done what I think is my best. I mean, some people think it was all right. Other people, quite evidently, don't. What can you do? I can't suddenly change my whole way of doing things. I can't change my interests. I can't change the way in which I react to things. That's part of that's somebody's style, and I'm just too bad. You've got to lump it.
The Duke, in his own words. Robert Hardman is a royal biographer, documentary maker. He toured Windsor Castle with Prince Philip for the BBC One series, The Queen's Castle. Robert, thank you for joining us. You've obviously had...